Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something that, might not be on the top of your packing list when you're thinking about your next cruise, but it's important. We're talking about medical care at sea.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in, the excitement of planning your itinerary and all, but we want you to be prepared just in case something unexpected happens.
And that's where this deep dive comes in. We found this blog post from a seasoned traveler, and this story about, well, a passenger having to be evacuated, it really got us thinking. Imagine being in the middle of the ocean and facing a medical emergency.
Right, and I think what people don't always realize is that, well, cruise ships aren't really floating hospitals. They have some medical facilities, but there are definitely limitations.
Totally. You might think those onboard doctors can handle anything, but in reality, most cruise ship infirmaries are really only equipped for the basics. Things like seasickness, minor injuries, maybe even a case of too much buffet.
And even then, there's a twist. A lot of times, the medical staff on these ships, they're actually independent contractors. That means the cruise line itself might not be liable if something goes wrong during a procedure.
Okay, hold on. That's a big deal. What does that mean for passengers?
It means that, well, if something does go wrong, trying to, pursue a lawsuit could be really complicated. It really highlights why it's so important to be proactive. And a big part of that is understanding your insurance.
Exactly. Most standard health insurance plans, they don't cover you for medical expenses when you're at sea. And Medicare, forget it.
Right. And, even if you have travel insurance, you got to read the fine print. Some
Yeah.
policies, they'll cover you if you trip and fall by the pool. But a major medical emergency that needs an airlift, that could be a different story.
And those airlifts, they're not cheap. We're talking like $50,000, sometimes even more, depending on where you are and what's going on. Having travel insurance that specifically covers medical expenses and emergency evacuation, it's not just a good idea, it's like essential.
It really is. And, this is another area where a little pre-trip research can be super helpful. Reading reviews about your cruise line, you can learn a lot. I mean, you can find out about potential health concerns, maybe past incidents on that ship, or even recurring issues.
So it's about like going beyond those glossy brochures and digging a little deeper.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to your health out there on the open sea.
It's kind of like that saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? Or in this case, maybe it's worth a $50,000 airlift.
Exactly. And speaking of prevention, there's another really important thing to think about: packing strategically.
You mean like packing a first aid kit?
That's a great start. But we're talking about going beyond the basics, more than just Band-Aids and antiseptic wipes.
Because even those little things, they can cost a fortune on the ship. I still can't get over that blogger who mentioned paying like $3 for a single Band-Aid.
It's crazy, right? That's why packing a well-stocked medical kit can save you so much hassle and money in the long run. Think motion sickness meds, pain relievers, stuff for stomach issues, things you might not think of but can really need.
Especially if you're prone to motion sickness, or if you have any like pre-existing conditions you need to manage.
Exactly. And don't forget the essentials, like sunscreen, aloe vera, that kind of thing, because getting a bad sunburn can really ruin your trip. And if you do have any pre-existing conditions, pack enough medication for the whole trip, plus some extra, just in case there are any unexpected delays.
And what about those situations where like the ship's infirmary just isn't equipped to handle a really serious medical issue? I know we touched on airlifts earlier, but can you walk us through what happens in those situations?
Yeah, we did, but it's worth taking a closer look. When something happens that's, beyond what the ship's doctor can handle, that's when you're talking about an emergency evacuation.
Like that passenger in the blog post we mentioned, the one who had to be airlifted.
Yeah.
That's a scary thought. And it could happen to anyone. Plus, it's not just the health scare, it's the financial hit too, right?
Absolutely. Blog mentioned that these evacuations can cost like upwards of $50,000, sometimes even more. It all depends on, where the ship is, what kind of medical care is needed, that sort of thing. That's why having that travel insurance with the medical evacuation coverage, it's really important.
It's like a safety net, not just for your health, but for your wallet too. It's easy to get caught up in planning a cruise and think, oh, that'll never happen to me. But the thing is, unexpected things, they do happen.
And, it's not always these major medical emergencies either. The blog post, it brought up another interesting point, something that's, well, actually pretty common: accidents. like slips and falls.
Oh, right. It's easy to forget that you're on a moving ship. Things can get slippery, especially like around the pool deck or if there's any, worn out carpeting.
Exactly. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier with, the independent contractors and lawsuits. If you were to, say, slip and fall because of, I don't know, negligence on the cruise line's part, things could get really complicated.
So who's responsible in that kind of situation? It sounds like it could be a real legal headache.
It can be a gray area, that's for sure. Going after a cruise line for something like that, it's it's not as straightforward as you might think. It's not impossible, but it definitely highlights why you have to be so careful and aware of your surroundings.
It sounds like knowledge is power,
Yeah.
right? Knowing your rights, understanding your insurance, being aware of your surroundings, all of that can make a huge difference.
It really can.
Okay, so let's say I've done my homework. I've checked my insurance, thought about travel insurance. I'm like up to date on any potential health concerns with my cruise. What else can I do to, prepare from a health and safety standpoint?
Well, besides packing smart, like we talked about, take some time to, familiarize yourself with the ship's medical facilities. See what they have, where things are located, and check out their procedures, like what to do in case of an emergency. Usually, you can find all of this on the cruise line's website or maybe in the documents they send you before the trip.
That's a good point. It's one thing to know, okay, the ship has a doctor, but knowing where the medical center is, what hours they're open, what to do if something happens, that's really important.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to, you know, speak up if you need medical attention. The
Mm.
staff on the ship, they're there to help. But you always have to be your own advocate, especially when it comes to your health.
That's great advice. It's easy to feel helpless when something unexpected happens, especially if you're in a new place. Knowing what to do and who to contact, that can make all the difference.
It really can. And remember, even if you do everything right, sometimes things just happen, you know? But
Yeah.
by being informed, by being proactive, you're giving yourself the best chance to handle whatever comes your way.
I like that. It's not about being paranoid, it's about being empowered. A little preparation can go a long way.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, what are some key takeaways for our listeners to remember about cruise ship healthcare?
Yeah, we covered a lot. If you're just tuning in, you missed out on some great info, but what are the big things people should remember about, staying healthy and safe on a cruise? Well, I think the biggest takeaway is, you got to be your own advocate. Don't wait until you're on the ship to think about medical stuff. Do your research before you go, know what your options are, and pack smart. It's really about having peace of mind. When you know you've done everything you can to prepare, then you can actually relax and enjoy the cruise.
I love that. It's not about being scared, it's about being prepared. A little planning goes a long way. So to recap, check your insurance, think about getting that specialized travel insurance, do some research on the cruise line and the ship itself, pack that well-stocked medical kit we talked about, and be mindful of your surroundings when you're on board. What else? Am I missing anything?
Oh, just one more thing. Remember that, cruises are a social thing. Connect with your fellow passengers, especially if you're traveling alone. If a real emergency happens, having someone who knows your medical needs, that could be a lifesaver.
That's such a good point. A cruise ship might seem like a floating city, but a little human connection can make all the difference. Okay, listeners, here's something to think about as you plan your next cruise. We talked about the money side of things, but what about the emotional side? Like, imagine having to deal with getting sick or hurt when you're far from home, away from your usual support system. It's something to consider, as you're making those travel plans.
Absolutely. Being prepared isn't just about having the right stuff, it's about having the right mindset, too.
And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the world of cruise ship medical care. We hope you found this helpful and that you feel empowered to set sail with confidence. Until next time, happy travels.